Chicago, most homicides in the entire country. St. Louis, second highest murder rate in the country. Illinoisans on both sides of the state having to deal with the issue of murder. Good morning, Springfield's Morning News. I'm Greg Bishop on 92.7 WMAY. New report out this morning from Wirepoints. Talks about how Chicago, New Orleans, nation's murder capitals in 2022. And it's not just the total number of homicides, it is the homicide rate that they break down. You can go to wirepoints.com where you can see the article, download the report in full, or read it all. And of course, we'll break down some of the findings here. But want to hear from you at 217-629-7970. That's how you can always chime in live and local. You can also follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. Just search Bishop on Air, and you can find me basically anywhere. I'm a pretty reachable guy, so make that happen. And provide tips, provide story suggestions, all of that. Always interested to hear what you guys are thinking and seeing out there. But let's get to this with the latest out of Wirepoints showing the homicide rates and delving into which areas are the most dangerous. We've had this conversation, at least in, earlier this week, a story out of a Fox affiliate out of Chicago saying that Springfield is the second most dangerous city in Illinois. But obviously, after delving further into those numbers and hearing from Springfield police, there's a lot of cities that aren't reporting the reports that cities like Springfield are. So really a story there is that there's a lot of cities that just aren't being honest with their statistics, and Springfield is being honest with their statistics. So that's not what this report from Wirepoints is looking at. This report from Wirepoints is looking at the 75 largest cities across the country, and what they find is that there are some significant areas of the country that are homicide hotspots, they say. And if you break down some of the charts they have here, let's just take a look at U.S. homicide hotspots in 2022. Number one is Chicago. Wirepoints reporting that just in 2022 alone, 697 homicides total. All right, that is about like 180 some odd more than what was Philadelphia at number two for total number of homicides. Then you look at the homicide rate, the per capita rate. So they look at 1 per 100,000, and where do these various cities stack up on that? Chicago, actually, because it's rather populated, it landed at number 13 on this list. Number 13 on this list. But if you look at the total list here, St. Louis is actually number 2 on the list with 68.2 homicides per 100,000. That's just behind New Orleans. So some other charts that they pulled together here include more detail about New Orleans being the number 1 homicide rate, Chicago at the number 2, and you can see a list of all of the different cities when it comes to total number of homicides. St. Louis had 200 homicides in 2020. Then you look at Chicago, again, compared with all the other cities they looked at, the top cities they looked at for 2022, and just how many more homicides Chicago had than, say, Philadelphia, than, say, Atlanta, Georgia, than say even, San Antonio or Detroit or Los Angeles. So obviously there's an issue in Chicago. But Wirepoints also looking at the homicide rates. St. Louis, again, number 2 at 68.2. Chicago at 13th with 25.8 per 100,000. So the safest cities that Wirepoints shows, Plano, Texas, apparently had 1 homicide. Their rate was 0.3 per 100,000. You've got others. Let's see, how did Indiana do? Indianapolis, where were they on this list? Let's see if we could find that in some of the other documentation. Indianapolis ranked 14th for total number of homicides. Did they make the list for homicide rates? They did at number 18 with 23.8 homicides per 100,000. So you can see the way these numbers are broken down and what's some of the rationale behind why we have cities in parts of the country that don't have many homicides, but others have a lot of homicides. One of my colleagues talked with Matt Rosenberg. He's with Wirepoints, the senior editor with Wirepoints, and that's not Matt. Here we go. There's some differences there. There's some key things that are happening in these so-called murder capital states and cities that's not happening elsewhere. Rosenberg says one thing is it's a lack of prosecution of certain crimes that's led criminals being free to commit even more crimes.
95% of the time that criminals commit a crime, a reported crime in Chicago, they don't even get arrested, and we do not blame the police for that.
Now, it's not just Chicago. You've got St. Louis that's also impacting Illinoisans on the other side of the state.
Well, St. Louis had the second highest rate nationally, 68.2 homicides per 100,000 population, after New Orleans.
So a lot of concern here and as far as what's going on with these various populations and their homicide rates that they have to deal with. And Rosenberg even going on to say even further that, and I'll just quote here from the story my colleague Andrew Hensel put together, both St. Louis and Baltimore have almost identical very high rates, even in 2019 when compared to 2022. In a city like St. Louis or a city like Baltimore, if you look at governance, there is endemic corruption, Rosenberg said. So he's linking corruption with violent crime and including in violent crime homicide rates. So if you get a chance, look at that Wirepoints study, rather fascinating, and that coming out today, highlighting how both sides of the state, Illinoisans dealing with high rates of murder.